So how many of you have actually read the book? Okay, those of you who haven't read the book, don't worry, you will still be able to follow the discussion. So, and this is a book that I encourage you to read no matter what your interest is. It sounds like a political thriller, but it's not only a political thriller. It gives us some very interesting insights on the culture of today. And as with all of Houellebecq's books, the protagonists are quite interesting archetypes. So, let's imagine we're in France, and we are before presidential elections. And the country is on the line. Everything is very, very unstable. Why? Because on the second round, we've got the National Front, predictable, of Marine Le Pen, but also a new party, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is led by a charismatic, moderate Muslim. And it manages to get to the second round, and it has some good chances of winning. So now, France is in existential crisis. Europe is in existential crisis. Because we're talking about the country of laïcité, and secularism, and what France stands for is literally on the line. There are riots in the streets. There are street fights between radical Muslims and nationalists, and we are set for drama. This drama, we experience it through the eyes of the narrator. The narrator is François. And François is, basically, if you've read one of Houellebecq's novel, the hero is basically the same. Someone who is bored, alienated. He's a bit like Camus' Stranger. Or he's a bit like Nietzsche's Last Man. Unheroic, uninspiring, unmotivated. The way François describes himself is, quote, "I am thoroughly disgusted with my life. I am sick of myself, but so far from changing my ways." Disgusted with his life, but so far from changing his ways. So what we have in the hero is frustration without agency. And that's why I think he's a very interesting archetype. He reminds me a lot of the internet Twitter warrior, or the incel, or many other of the figures that we see in the culture war. Frustration, but at the same time, I cannot change anything. I feel like I'm imprisoned. So, how does he experience all this political chaos around him? Not very strongly, except for one thing. François has a lot of trouble finding romantic or sexual fulfillment, but there is this one girl that managed to give him some sexual kind of satisfaction. But she's a Jew. And she says that she thinks that a country which is somewhere between the nationalists and the Muslim Brotherhood is not a great place to be. So she jumps on an airplane and goes back to Israel. So this is the only way he kind of perceives this historical change around him having an impact on his life. Otherwise, he's completely untouched by it. So his profession is that he's a scholar, he's a university lecturer, and he's obsessed with a French author from the 19th century called, and I hope I pronounce him well, Joris Karl Huysmans, yes. So Huysmans, in a way, is his soulmate from a different era, because Huysmans is also alienated, is also a misanthrope, is also pessimist, and he's looking for redemption. But the difference is Huysmans manages to find redemption. Where? In Christianity. He goes to a church in Rocamadour and he has this revelation and his life changes. And from then, he devotes his life to God. And François, our narrator, tries to do the same thing. Goes to Rocamadour, it's like, is it gonna come? Nothing. The same way that he cannot get fulfillment or satisfaction from sex, he cannot get it from religion. Why? Because it's like, there's nothing here. There's nothing happening inside him. So his struggle for redemption is in some ways intertwined, his fate is intertwined with the fate of France. So what's going to happen then in this historic and fatal second round of the French election? And what happens is the unthinkable. The socialists and the center-right basically support the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood wins. So on Monday morning, we wake up in France, which is now on its way to becoming an Islamic republic or something like that. So you see this and you say, oh my God, this is going to be such a huge change. Like, I mean, this Trump and Brexit was nothing in front of that. This is going to be huge. This is going to be the event that we've all been expecting. I mean, a bad event, but an event. But Houellebecq notices that we live in times that nothing really great happens. Like, was Trump's victory such a historical thing after all? Like the day after? Was Brexit the revolution that we all expected it would be? Not really. So the day after in France is, some things have changed. The main thing that has changed is education, because the Muslim Brotherhood has a lot of money from Saudi Arabia, so they buy off all the universities and they turn them to religious institutions. The left is happy with that. More money to education. I mean, it's not that they have any particular vision for education, so they're okay with that. And for me, the funniest part of the book is how Houellebecq is satirizing the intellectuals as basically intellectual prostitutes. So one day our hero receives a check from the university which says, thank you very much for your services. We wish you luck. You can go to a private university. You don't fit in our curriculum. And here is a check. And the check includes all the money that he would get if he would retire at 65 for the rest of his life. And our hero realizes that the authorities are bribing every single academic with loads and loads of money. And he thinks, oh, the Saudis are probably doing this to buy off the intellectuals because otherwise they would revolt. But what a waste of money, because no one would revolt anyway, because they're not capable of anything like a revolt. So Houellebecq has a lot of vitriol for academics and for intellectuals. So at that point, you read the book and you think, Houellebecq is giving us a warning about Europe being taken over by the Muslims, with the left being the accomplice. And that's what most people think, and that's why they say he's an Islamophobe. He's like, how they call it, he's dog whistling to the racist and to the far right. Except that Houellebecq is not doing this at all. Because here comes the biggest plot twist, philosophical plot twist in the book, which is that the reaction by the conservatives, the radical conservatives, the nationalists, the traditionalists, do they take up in arms and go to fight the Islamists? Soon they realize, wait a minute, we're supposed to hate the Islamists, but we hate the woke, the Muslims hate the woke. We hate feminism, the Muslims hate feminism. We hate liberal atheism, Muslims hate liberal atheism. Could it be that these Muslims are our way to everything that we've expected, to do everything that we stand for? So slowly, the conservative, let's say the radical conservative protagonists of the book come to the realization that Islam is the best vehicle for some kind of moral order to return to the West. That Islam is not only willing to do so, but Islam is dynamic, as opposed to Christianity, which is old and boring. And Islam takes these things seriously. And other people take Islam seriously. I mean, if you piss off the Pope, who cares? Like, it's a joke. If you piss off Islam, if you piss off Muslim Brotherhood, you worry. You don't want to be there. So Houellebecq is basically making the case that this return to order and this return to meaning is not going to come from Christianity, but what if it comes from supposedly the biggest enemy who is at the gates, which is Islam? And what about other parts of society that are frustrated by the lack of meaning? Take, for example, young men. We keep hearing young men are left behind, they can't find a girlfriend, they watch Jordan Peterson videos, they take online courses on pickup and game. But what if Islam is also the answer for them? One wife for each one of you. Oh, more! 3 wives for each one of you. Some of them very, very young. And if you can handle it, more. So, again, these previously alienated parts are like, oh, we've got something here. My life is promising to become better. And what about women? Women are left behind, right? They cannot be better off in such a society. Wait a minute, says Houellebecq. Are Muslim women really, really as bad as we think? I mean, okay, they wear a veil and maybe a burqa, but they spend their day out, shopping, they have children. And then, in one of the most memorable parts of the book, she says, when they return home, they throw away their veil, they put on, and he says they are transformed to these birds of paradise. They put on this kind of sexy underwear, and they say, now this is my realm of seduction, my realm of eroticism. Whereas, in Houellebecq's eyes, what is the life of a Western, modern, liberal woman? You have to dress in these uncomfortable heels, spend all day in a career you probably hate, you're probably childless, and then you return home and you're so tired, you throw your, quote, sexy clothes and you put baggy pajamas and there's zero energy for seduction and you spend basically your night with Netflix, wine, and antidepressants. So, could it be that even for women, even for this Tradcon kind of model that many conservatives have in mind, Islam could also be the answer? Now, you read this and you wonder, is he sarcastic or does he really mean it? Will Islam be the answer for kind of the last alienated man to find meaning? So, if we follow our hero, Francois, at the end of the book, he decides it's time for me to convert to Islam. He doesn't get any spiritual fulfillment, though. But he puts it down and says, look, they're going to pay me a lot of money. I'm going to have 3 wives. I'm going to do whatever I want. Maybe Islam is a solution for me. But it's as dry as speaking, I don't know, from a catalog on what food to eat. So it proves his conversion, as opposed to Wisman's, proves quite a shallow experience. So this is basically what's happening in the book. So why is the book, I think, important? I think it's because Houellebecq hits on 2 nerves. The one nerve is this counterclimactic way that the day after the taking over of the Muslim Brotherhood is. So why is this counterclimactic? Because, and this is a sympathetic reading which I'm doing, that probably he's saying, look, the West has already fallen from within. It's not that the Muslim Brotherhood is going to come and it's going to change everything and it's going to destroy the West. The West is already destroyed. It's like a tree trunk which is shallow and there's a lightning breaking it, but it was already broken. So what's the big point? The gates were already open. And the second thing, which I think is I hope it's his irony and he doesn't mean it, it's when he says that, well, conservatives, maybe they're going to fit in well with the Islamists. So basically, he's mocking his own crew. He's mocking his own milieu. He's saying, look, conservatives and traditionalists, we're not fit up for the fight. Actually, we're so empty that don't be surprised if you find the Islamists being your friends. And I mean, you could say this is his Houellebecq's fantasy and this would never happen. But let me remind you one interesting kind of moment in history. So last August, the Taliban entered Kabul. What a big shock. It was a moment where if you care about West, the Enlightenment, whatever, you should be on shock. If you'd see most of the culture warriors of the right on Twitter, they were mostly laughing. They were saying, haha, look, I don't see any masks in Kabul. Haha, there's not going to be any more gender studies in Kabul. Oh, haha, these hoes now are going to have to cover up. So it's almost as if they felt not at home, but it was like, oh, this is a breath of fresh air from this quote of woke decline of the West. Or see how many radical conservatives today in the States, particularly Trumpites, are Putin's useful idiots. Again, their mode of thinking is the woke hate Putin, we hate the woke, we are sure that everything is wrong with the West is because of the woke, therefore maybe Putin is not that bad of a guy. In a way, it's a similar betrayal as the one they're doing in the book, where they say, well, maybe these guys are our friends. And it shows something. It shows that conservatism is not going to be the vehicle through which the West is going to be saved. There's a very interesting dialogue in the book where someone asks our hero, or anti-hero, they ask him, so are you for patriarchy? And he says, look, I'm not for anything, but at least patriarchy existed. And I was thinking, isn't this the typical conservative today? I don't know what I stand for, but I stand for this thing that existed. Like, make America great again. What made America great? Oh, I have no idea. But I stand for that. So this shallowness, this emptiness, this almost gesture character of the politics of conservatism, I think Houellebecq makes a great job at mocking it. And again, I hope he's mocking it and he's not saying that maybe that's the way to go. So to finish, what are we to make of Houellebecq? So, because again, most of his books is, if you've read it, is like nothing actually happens throughout the book. It's fun reading it, but you wonder, what's happening here? I have all his books in Kindle, and sometimes I wonder, did I buy a wrong edition? Like, the book stops, and like there's no climax, there's nothing that has happened. And yet I cannot stop reading him. Ayn Rand has a brilliant quote about Dostoevsky. She says, reading Dostoevsky is like entering a chamber of horrors, but with a powerful guide. With Houellebecq, I think you're entering this kind of realm of nothingness, of decline, of stasis, but he's like an entertaining companion in telling you stories about this era of hollowness and this era of nothing happening. So there was a talk here about modernism earlier, and there's this famous modernist line by Eliot which says, this is how the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whim. With Houellebecq, the world ends with a shrug. It's like the world is ending, but who cares? And in real life, he was asked by a journalist, so who are you? What are you for? So you're an atheist, but you write about religion. He says, I'm an atheist / agnostic, but he said, but also I'm a Catholic, in the sense that I express the horror of a world without God. The horror of a world without God. Why horror? Because Houellebecq has given up anything that could alleviate this horror. He doesn't believe in agency, or if he does, he makes a good job in hiding it, because none of his heroes has agency in any of the books. There's only things happening to them. They don't do anything, they don't take initiative. See our hero here. The love of his life went to Israel. Basically, he doesn't do anything. It's not that he's super busy. He doesn't even think of, I can jump on an airplane and go and find her. It's like, I miss her so much. Well, I guess, she's gone. No agency, no action at all. But also, think about this line which is so popular among, again, reactionaries and conservatives today. Life is suffering. Jordan Peterson has even made it a meme. Life is suffering. How can you have agency if your view of life is that life is suffering? Life is suffering basically means I couldn't help it. I can't help it. Best thing I can do is have a bit less of suffering. Again, like Houellebecq's heroes. The only way they find some alleviation to the suffering is they have some microwavable Chinese meals. For some reason, this is a huge highlight in the day of the hero. Or every now and then, a semi-decent erection with a prostitute, because all of Houellebecq's heroes also have kind of sexual gratification issues. So this is as good as life can get. Life is suffering. And again, if this is your view of the world, you cannot expect anything better than what you get with Houellebecq. Nothingness or submission. Submission to someone who actually stands for something. Something bad, but they stand for something. So, to finish, there's this philosopher that I like, and he has this line, He says the worse the common future, the more it should motivate its opponents. So the worse the future, the more you should motivate to do stuff. With Houellebecq, it's the opposite. The worse the upcoming future, the more you should say, well, what can we do? And I think we should say no. We should see Houellebecq's heroes and say, we're not going to be that guy. Whatever this guy is doing, we're going to be different. We're going to have agency, and we're not going to give up the future. Thanks.